Yeah, what kind of play? Suddenly I realized that the prince was still holding my hand. It seemed to have opened the streets as if it were bad, but suddenly a warning sound rang somewhere near the street. I have to go back now, I'll be grateful for the Lord's God's majesty. Hurry, the red gauge bar over his head and hurried away again. As soon as I about to do it, the prince suddenly let go of his hand and grabbed my cheeks. I struggled with surprise. What the hell is this? Why are you doing this? Stay still for a second. At that moment the crown prince lowered his head and pushed his face close to me. The red-hot iris was just around the corner. I froze hard. I was about to close my eyes to the face of a man getting closer. The hot air suddenly reached the sides of both eyes. Don't be sick, princess. Callisto looked down at me and made a silent move. If you're sick, it's not worth saving this whole body. As if wiping away tears, a hot thumb darted under my eyes. I gave it a shut. I stopped breathing. My mind went blank. There was no knowing why he was so sudden doing this. Stop going in, he said. After a long time of repeating the meaningless act, he let my face go. It was only after turned around with a proud face and steadily turned aside the blocked breath burst out. All the way back to the room my mind was confused and complicated. Why on earth did he do such a thing? My heart still fluttered, so I had to take a deep breath many times. Like a hot pack on your face during the chilly winter months, still hot under the snow. I felt like the texture was left behind. I felt so strange that I was going to climb the central staircase. Scratching my fingertips around it, I ran into a group of servants who had coming down after cleaning up. They suddenly stopped and tried to say hello to me, and they suddenly saw me and were terrified. Hey, then it may pass quickly. What is it? I tilted my head. However, the servants of this home often looked at me and were scared, so I handed it insignificantly. After climbing the rest of the stairs, I opened the door bulk and stepped inside, and Emily, who was cleaning the bedding, turned her head. Lady, you're here. By the way, why you screaming at me? All of a sudden I thought there was a bug, so I looked around and shouted. What? Why do you do that? Look at the mirror quickly. Emily approached and pushed me. I went into the bathroom as I was puzzled, and in the mirror I met right away. I saw a zombie as soon as I saw it. What is this? After a short scream of shock, I quickly thrust my face into the mirror. The dark black artificial dark circles on the eyelids were down to the cheeks to create Quahin's skeleton. In addition, several layers of powder to make it look pale had been peeled off. It was gruesome, so it mingled well with the gracious outline that came down to the cheeks. A white pajama dress worn to act as a slender lady with a deep complexion. My reflection in the mirror was really like a resurrected corpse when I was frantically confirming my massive skeleton. A flash of light flashed through my mind, a sudden grab at the cheek, a jig at the edge of one's eye. The prince who rubbed the cheek. Do you think learning a play these days is a noble basic skill? He, that bastard, the man who noticed that I was dressed up, made a mess by biting my face with his hand. I was ashamed after a while, but I couldn't stand it anymore. Callisto Regulus, you crazy man! For a while an unknown roar leaked out of the princess' room. It was a few days later that I recalled again what I had forgotten in the fury of the mad crown prince. What, you don't participate in the training? I visited Eclise early in the morning. I looked at the butler who was reporting the news in a daze. Yes, according to an article using the same room, they haven't been out of the room for days. Why? For the reason the butler blurted out the end of his words. Well, he just got a report and came to tell me. Why did the first brother know? He don't know yet. It was the biggest concern, but it was fortunate he was in a situation where he had accepted the Akartian order, which he could not even get near as a slave. But if Derrick, the chief commander, knew that he had left training without permission, it would not be a problem to be kicked out of the Duke. But really, why? I didn't understand. Eclise, who had just been a regular part of the training. I was so proud of you for doing your job faithfully without causing any trouble that you've given me a whole bunch of presents, including a necklace, sword, and then butler, did you deliver Eclise's clothes? Well, gift reminded me. His winter clothes, which he had recently entrusted to the Foundation, were all completed. Yes, as you told me, I delivered it during the break so that all the knights could see it. Really well done. But the butler hesitated and continued after that, I leaving the box untouched. What a loud noise came out unknowingly. You're not looking at the gift I gave you. It came to me more seriously than without training. What the hell is going on? At that moment there was a scene that flashed across my mind not long ago when I met the crown prince in the back. I saw someone quickly disappearing into the forest. Was it really Eclise? Then I frowned and opened my mouth. The butler, you know where the apprentices use the lodge? Yes, it's near the State of the Union. Please give me some guidance. I hurriedly got out of my seat and added I'd better go see Eclipse right now. The accommodation used by apprentices was located in a forest near the curb. Perhaps because they were all out of training, the surroundings of the building were empty. Come this way, my lady. The butler did not let me out to the entrance first. As I stepped inside, a neat but narrow corridor and stairs followed. It was not a bad accommodation for apprentices, however the southern building seemed quite unfamiliar to me, perhaps because I went back and forth with the luxurious Duke house all the time. What floor is it on? It is on the 4th floor. The butler led me back ahead. How long has it been since we climbed the stairs? Wow, fuck, how many are these? We were just trying to climb the remaining stairs. I stopped walking at the sound. You're lucky to be a slave. I heard that crazy dog is so into it that he can't be bothered. Last time she bought you a couple of pieces of weapons. 4 or 6 people were having a low-level conversation while training, perhaps because they were playing hooky. It was the story of me and Eclise no matter what. Hey, what have you been blessed with? An even paddle? Yeah, I heard the babies wait for you at night. It must be hard for him to please the crazy dog. Perhaps I never dreamed that there would be a party down there. But I burst into laughter at the last one's words. I could feel the butler glancing back at me with a white face. I passed them calmly and climbed the stairs in front of a door not far from the stairs. 4 scumbags were giggling at thick furry clothes surrounding a big box. Those were the gifts I gave to Eclise. If you're so envious, you guys should also make the grounds for your looks. Such poor looks must be hard to please a prostitute. Laughter was cut off by the extraordinary remark. What? The eyes of the men who found me were wide open. It's always time to talk excitedly, and your predictable reactions were boring. You were already born that way, so you're wrong. I tilted my head sideways and asked in a boring voice. Then you want me to help you fix your face with magic? Just say it. Who would say anything about a crazy dog biting you in the face, princess? Did you hear that, butler? I scurriedly smiled back at the butler who came up behind me. Remember these faces and take responsibility, and send them to my first brother with every word they say. This is the result of the thunderstorm you created. Note, go baby girl. So yeah, I'm a little bit bored. I'ma drop this for y'all. Enjoy. Yes, lady. The butler bent his waist down with a stiff face. Gee, butler Indiana, the face of a deacon who almost fell flat in front of me. The knights opened their mouths. Soon they realized the seriousness of the situation, and they came rushing to the scene. You're mistaken, we were like, no, the big guys are wooing all at once because of the approach. The hallway was filled in an instant. As I tried to move directly to the room of Eclise, I frowned arrogantly. The butler, who was quick to notice me, hurriedly blocked my way. Stand back, which is safe. Butler, that's not what we said. One of them tried to excuse the butler, but it was blocked by the butler, who shook his head in silence. Only then did they change course and look back at me. Please, princess, I'll explain everything. Everyone, get out. I urged you to look at the man who was blocking the front with a cold eye. It smells disgusting and I don't want to talk to you. Move, miss. Why? Do you want me to strangle you in public like that guy from the smoke field last time? Surely the best evil woman in the game was right. Penelope had something to discourage people. A man who was distracted by the words she gave with a smile stepped back in dismay. After hesitating, they quickly stepped back and moved in turn. I'm kicking myself in the middle of the hall. Because I was standing, I was staring at the gift box which had been messed up by them. And then I soon gave a scowl to the butler. He jabbed at the door where Eclise was staying. Hey Eclise, it's me, butler. Would you mind opening your door for me to talk to you? The butler knocked on the door several times. It was silent when the door did not open. After a few jabbed, the butler returned my face with a perplexed look. I think it's in there, but shall I bring the iron, miss? I thought for a moment, and soon shook my head. It's kind of picky, but it was a disaster in many ways. If Eclise, who saw her in the forest of sponsorship, I passed the butler, and stood at the door of the tightly closed room. Then lightly raised my hand and knock, knock, knock. It's me. Eclise, open the door for me, please. Still the door showed no sign of opening, even though I stepped out myself. I opened my mouth again after a brief interval. I'm here because I'm worried. Should I just go back if you don't like it? If there was no response this time, I was really going to go back. If I forced myself to open the door, I might lose his favor. After waiting for a while, I turned my back. It was the moment. I heard a small hint over the thin, crude door. Gains and losses. The door, which seemed unlikely to open forever, slowly opened. At the sound of it he paused and turned back again, only a cheek wide of the open door. The inside was dark, as if the curtains were closed in broad daylight. I turned my head toward the butler again. "Before you guys take a good lead to my older brother and stop working, how could you go alone?" The butler hardened his face as if concerned. "No matter how low a slave is, how can a noblewoman be left alone in a place where men live? Don't worry, I don't mean to be around for a long time, then I'll come back to the bar and wait for you in front of the building." "Sure, thank you." I gave a slight nod and the butler went away. After that the butler hurried down the stairs. I reached out and opened the door after the butler had completely disappeared. At the sound of a rusty hinge the door opened a little more. As expected, the curtains were closed, and the interior was dark. But the old curtains had holes all over them through which sunlight shot through them. Thanks to this it was easy to identify the surroundings. I stood on the door frame for a moment, and glanced my eyes to check inside. Only the table connecting the two beds was placed in a small space. Thanks to that it was not difficult to find a sulky man. "Eclise," I whispered to him, and took a grain of salt into the room. The quilt on the bed by the window rose as I approached it. I hesitated because near the bed where he lay, flowers were scattered all over the table and on the floor. Perhaps because of them being half withered, the room smelled fragrant and stale. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying hard to avoid the flowers. Then I'll gently lay my hands on the bulging blanket and talk to Eclise. "The master is here, won't you show her your face?" As expected, I was worried that there was no answer coming back. I gently waved my hand on the blanket. "Are you sick, Eclise?" Eclipse, wearing a blanket back to his head, did not budge. "You couldn't even participate in the training because you couldn't talk and you were sick alone." In a flash I jumped out of my seat. I'll call in a doctor." "Wait a moment." I tried to get out of the hurry. A feeble touch holding the hem of a garment fell and I stopped walking, looking back at the bedside again. The arms that had slipped out of the bed between the covers held tightly to the end of the skirt. "Don't go, just stay by my side, master, my baby." Eclise, a voice leaked from the quilt as if to hold something back. Has he ever said something so weak? When I looked down at the hem of my skirt, I sat on his bed again. Even though I said I would not go, did not know if his hands would fall off her skirt. I stretched out my hand, and this time not on the blanket, but slightly overlapped the back of the hand of Eclise holding me. It was to check if there was a fever. "System Eclise, favorability, are you sure you want to confirm 8 million gold fame 200? As soon as he held his hand, a white square window immediately rose into the air. I wanted to check his favorability, but I just quit because I couldn't see the gauge bar because it was covered by a blanket. Fortunately, I could feel the warmth under my hands as if it was like a cold. "You don't go out for training?" I was worried. I uttered a soft voice because Eclise didn't look very happy. Fortunately, response came immediately this time. "Are you sure you're worried about me?" But it wasn't positive like a habit. "You're not trying to appease me?" The sharp voice made my eyes wide open. Looking for something to say for a moment, I gently patted his hand on the back and said, "If I hadn't worried, I wouldn't have come all the way here myself." "Eclise, that day you didn't come right after you saw me." As expected, it wasn't wrong that day. I opened my mouth to make excuses and thought hard about what had offended Eclise. "I couldn't come right away because I had some work to do." "Did you come to see me?" After he uttered the words, I could see a little why he was sulky. "You're upset because I've been with the Crown Prince for a long time. Anyway, I'm in favor of you now. I was in the middle of a love simulation game. The last time I saw him was 86%, so Eclise had some affection for me." "What do you mean?" I was a little surprised at the belated realization. I've never thought deeply about what he thinks of me rationally, because I've been in a hurry to raise my favor. "Then does the dark red color mean affection?" I looked up the color of Eclise gauge bar and looked at his head, said hurriedly, recalling that the gap was too long. If I had known, I should have put everything aside and come in a month. A sweet voice popped out as intended because I had to release the sulky man right now. I was annoyed because I couldn't put the gift box in the room. Then Eclipse murmured something out of the blue. I, wondering, soon noticed what he was saying. The box was also large as it contained several large winter clothes that I had given outside. "So you can put a box in a small room?" It meant that there was no such thing because you like the humidity that I'm happy to receive. I wanted to say thank you. The words of Eclise were rather mixed up as he murmured as if he were telling something. He slowly pulled down his covered blanket, an old curtain leaking in under the dim light. A fine whitish face was revealed, like a wax figure. At the same time he popped out his hand that he had hidden under the blanket. I can only give you this half-withered flowers, always dark with brown ends. They were woven round and shaped like a small flower crown. Then what the flower was, I remembered. A few days ago, when it was drizzling, it was the white field flower I saw with Eclise in the glass greenhouse. I looked up again and looked at the face of the complete DeLuca at that moment. All the accidents came to a standstill. I opened my mouth blankly because I couldn't believe what I was seeing now. Because of what Eclise was going to give me as a flower crown or a gift. Who is that? What did you get? And laughed so brightly because the gray eyes are soakingly wet. First time passion swirled in the grayish-brown pupil that was encountered. Glitters rolled down his cheeks. Nevertheless, Eclipse remained as expressionless as ever. Like a man who has no feelings. So I couldn't notice right away the fact that he is crying now, Eclise. Over a doll-like face lying, tears streaming down like. I stared blankly at the desperate figure for a while, and managed to squeeze my voice. Are you crying now? I was trembling as if it contained my incredible feelings. Without a breath, Eclipse just stared at me in tears and didn't answer. But above his head, clear dark red Eclise favorability gauge bars began to sparkle dangerously. My heart sank. I raised my hand reflexively and put it on his cheek. Don't cry, Eclise. Why are you crying? I wiped the tears with my thumb as if it were a wet stream and soothed his tears like an old child. And at the same time, million gold of the system window, which is still floating. I chose it soon, checking for favor next to the gauge bar turned into figures. Favorite 84%. What is it? I took a sharp breath at the vivid white numbers. Why 84%? My head suddenly became frantic. The last time I checked in the glass greenhouse it was definitely 86%. I was clearly remembering it. By the way, the favorability of Eclise was low for the first time. Please tell me. At that time he opened his mouth looking at me, who had been wiping away tears. Who's that man? The sound of a stifled voice came to my senses. He is the Crown Prince. I couldn't stop worrying about the facts. Then Eclise's pupil shook once. The Crown Prince, yes. His unwavering face in tears, curiously shrank at the moment. I knew right away why he was doing it. The Crown Prince was the main culprit who destroyed his homeland. He stopped by the Duke Mansion because he had something to tell me. I got it. What did he come to deliver? Eclise asked. As soon as I finished, I received the ancient relics and materials from the palace. I answered mildly, but I hid the fact that I had received a diamond mine. Because it didn't do any good. But for a reasonable reason, I added. I could have asked for one thing I wanted as a prize for winning the competition. Why don't you let the servant bring it to master directly? Eclise, but Eclise seemed not very convinced. In addition, when he knew he was the Crown Prince of the Empire, he was outspoken in his rude remarks. The man. I was stunned to call him. He looked at me through my eyes without even blinking, and somehow I felt a little appalled. Whatever the answer would be, I answered hesitatingly. I was sick. I couldn't think of a better excuse. It was as expected. Surprised, Eclise's eyes slowly widened. Did you get sick? So I couldn't go to the palace, and he stopped by. I wasn't going to tell you, but that's why I couldn't come to see you right away. At last the persistent question stopped. Eclise couldn't bring it up easily. As if he didn't know what to answer, he asked, whispering long after. Did it hurt a lot? I'd been overdoing it during the hunting competition and caught a cold. So I couldn't budge a step out of the bed. I couldn't tell how I was looking at him, as if nothing had happened to me. I just feel the lukewarm skin that touches under my hand flinching. Why his cheeks began to feel more and more wet. Why don't you give me a word? Why you don't give me a word every time? Eclise, you could have sent someone else, butler, to let me know. I was dumbfounded by the expression full of sorrow, contrary to the still dull look. I couldn't say anything when asked so carefully. I guess I came to a conclusion by myself, and I got a rock power in my hand when I grabbed the withered flower crown. I don't deserve to be like that to my master. Don't cry. I comforted him again in a hurry. What would be my honor if I took the first place, and proudly comforted him? And my gift, don't crumple. I lowered my hand, which was jubilant with the tears of Eclise's pouring, and overlapped his hand, which was squeezing the flower crown. You're ruining it. It's already withered and it's nothing but trash. Throw it away, it's my gift, so it's up to me to judge. He pulled his hand out of me and quickly stopped me, who was trying to hold it back. Then he forced out his tightly grasped finger. Actually, I really don't want him to give it to me, and if he wants to shake me off, he can beat me. But he let loose his strength in his hands as if he were giving me a grudging defeat. Acting cute looks a little relieved, I was relieved inside. Soon enough I succeeded in taking the white flower pots out of his grasp. How hard I held it, already half of it was crushed and worn out. If the flower stalk wasn't a little bit stronger, it'd be all snapped off. It'd have reached the point where you have to throw it away. I kicked my tongue and carefully simplified the crown that I couldn't pour any more because it was a flower crown. It soon withered and crumbled up slowly. How is it does it suit me? With a wreath made by Eclise on my head, I looked back at him with the brightest smile I could. Passed by the crown prince and laughed. All because he recalled his sightings. Eclise has been looking at me without saying anything for a while. Why not pretty? I asked, tilting my head. Eclipse shook his head slowly after quite a long time. No, too, it's so beautiful, my master. He murmured to himself as if he were speaking to himself. I had the illusion that my tears made my wet, jet-colored eyes seem to have become a mess. I tried to check it again, but the shiny dark red-colored gauge bar caught my eye. It's a compliment, so it won't fall any further. Recalling the favorable sentiment that had fallen by 2%, I folded my eyes and laughed. That's a good thing, thanks. Did I tell you it was my favorite flower? I asked calmly, pretending I didn't remember, and the head of Eclise, who had been heard all along, dropped. He did not answer, but I could see this slight redness under his eyes. I opened my mouth with a deeper smile than before. I've got a present, so I'll have to return your favor. Do you need anything else? He shook his head when I asked. Out of the blue, he tried to establish an uneasy position within the knights, appealing to them to frequently find him. But today's eclipse, I want to be your one and only knight. He asked for something out of the blue. What does that mean? In an unexpected answer, I examined Eclise. I was distracted by his crying. So you've been wearing it all along, even when you sleep? I didn't know that even in my personal space I would have pieces of the statue I gave around my neck. Looking at the fancy necklace contrasting with shabby clothes, I spoke a little later. You're already my knight, it's the one and only knight. If not, why would I give you all the silver necklace? I said vaguely, as if courting, and laughed again. Did he notice what I'm staring at? Eclise glanced down at the necklace he was wearing around her neck and replied. Actually, I don't need this, master. You don't have to give any more. What I was taken aback by the remark. When I handed him the necklace, he kissed it, and his favor rose sharply. So far, every generous amount of financial support under the guise of gifts has gone up. I was very pleased with it. Eclise, of course, thought so did I, but now his whining is I'm not sure. Doesn't he seem to have forced them to bear them? Then what do you want? Am I missing something? The anxiety of favor quickly bit me. I want. Eclise hesitated, and soon he opened his mouth, looking at me with a clear gaze. Master, I want to be a sword master. Sword master, I stared blankly at the unexpected request. But you said you didn't need to use a sword. I remembered some time in the past. After learning that he was being ostracized within the knights, it was when I bought him a bunch of wooden swords and training supplies to keep him from being ignored. Master, this is enough for me. I don't think I'll ever use the real sword. A slave cannot be a formal knight. All I need to do is a wooden sword to trainings. Until then, Eclipse seemed not too keen on swordsmanship. It seemed to be bent solely on being attached to the workpiece. If it's for me, just pretend you don't know. It doesn't matter. It was for my own safety that I had to give him the ancient magic. Anxiety resulting from seeming lack of loyalty and affection to me. A low voice awakened me, who was lost in reminiscence. I'm sure you did. I've changed my mind. Eclise made his wet eyes clear. I don't think I'll to keep up with your orders, but I'm afraid I'll keep falling behind in training. I need someone to teach me order? I was confused about what he was saying for a moment ago. I immediately remembered what the order was, and the following words came to mind. I'll work hard and make a little bit of a good sword. Eclise, that's mean it doesn't matter if you can't get out of your slave status. I stopped myself from opening my mouth to make excuses, and Eclipse begged, I just want to use the sword you gave me. Will you do that for me? He said with a queer twitching look. He looked at me. It felt strange to see him like that. When did it change like this? Eclise, who always had dry eyes and no expression, has recently begun to hint at some meaningless fragments of emotion. In addition, it came as a shock that he, who had nothing particular to ask for, had asked for something so clearly. I rolled my head fast all the way. His favorability, which had only been on the upward trend, faltered in tone. I had to fix the thought that would come and take care of it. Then you'll be trained well in the future, right? I gave him my pinky finger, reminding him why I visited here. He looked at me with a curious look. I promise. I'll make sure I don't fall out like this. Please stay still you are until I escape. Eclipse glanced down at my pinky. Then he, soon wrapping with my fingers together, lowered his eyes and answered shyly. I promise. Eclise's hands were much bigger and longer than mine, twisting fingers as strongly as Ninkle's. With feeling the warmth of others, I nodded heavily. Okay, if that's what you want, then I'm going to listen. I wasn't sure if it's possible, so I bet it. In front of man Derrick, whose favorability has declined, the knight was not foolish enough to say that it was beyond my authority. System checked the favorability of Eclipse by deducting 10 million gold. The remaining funds, 70 million golds. I smiled brightly like a blooming flower. So don't cry, okay? Favorites 88%, 12% ahead. Whatever he wanted, the only answer to me was to listen. It was a time when we slowly left the accommodation building, lost in deep thought. Lady, by the time I reached the entrance, someone called me out of nowhere. Oh, butler, did you have a good talk? Yeah, well. I changed the subject. What about them? I followed your instructions. Really well done. Frankly speaking, I told him to fuck it once, but I didn't expect much. Derrick didn't see it anyway, so you wouldn't believe me very much. Even if he believed it, you'll be lucky to roll around in the smoke field. I was on my way to the mansion thinking nothing about it. However, in relation to the matter earlier, he said he wanted to see you for a moment. The butler added unexpected words. First, brother, I was wondering for a while, but I thought about it. I haven't finished organizing my thoughts and plans yet. However, it was better to use the iron horns as an excuse when things exploded than when things were not going well. I nodded at the butler. I'm coming right now. Derrick's office was located on the west side of the mansion, opposite the one where the Duke's office is located. As I was following the butler's footsteps, I looked around. Come to think of it, I've never been here before, so it's very strange. Soon after, the butler stopped at the door of a large, antique shape. Knock, knock, young Duke, Miss Penelope is here, let her in. The butler's hand opened the door. I stepped inward with light tension. I've seen Derrick's office through the game illustration a few times, but it was very strange to see Derrick's office in person. As if to show the cold-blooded nature of the owner, the office looked very desolate and restrained. After finishing my appreciation of my wealth at that short moment, I suddenly stopped. What is that? A window frame in front of a barrel of sunshine at noon. There was a beautifully crafted cage that did not go well with the stark atmosphere of the office. And inside it was a colorful bird that I had never seen before. A bird sitting in the sun fluttered its putioke wings as if it were wary of a low tooth, while several feathers fell to the bottom of a cage in the sky. It was as pretty as azalea. I was surprised by the aesthetic that he had, such a pet, and didn't fit that dirty personality at all. Eyes from a crimson bird in a cage. I was about to take my eyes off and turn my head. The eyes met head-on with cold blue eyes met head to face. The bird's owner was sitting at a desk full of papers, entering and staring at me calmly. So it's my first time seeing it since the hunting competition. The orange gauge bar was clearly visible, but it didn't bother me much. I stopped walking at a certain distance from his desk. There was a chill between him and me for a momentarily. But since the subordinate was me, I bowed my head, suppressing a slight backlash. You called? He turned his head up. It was quite heartless and businesslike to say that brother and sister were greeting each other. Sit for a moment, works are still not done yet, Arthur, let's finish and talk, said Derrick, jigging on the back table. It was in front of a cage. He called someone in and said he would work, but I turned around and headed towards him. because I wanted to see birds. The bird looking at me approaching and was on alert stared to flap his wings. So I get close to the cage instead. I just sat on the sofa in front of it and looked around. The nameless bird was erecting a crimson, curly tail like a foxhole. He was an orphan even though he was an animal. It wasn't just him. Whenever there is movement, the bird's body is shining brightly. What is it? I looked closely, and the beak's claws and eyes are really unique except for the scarlet fur. It looked like something. It is reflected in the sunlight like a diamond and glows in a colorful way. Awesome, it's totally amazing. The most outstanding of them was the brilliant jewel. I was watching the beautiful bird after losing it. Suddenly my arm popped out from the side. Do you want a tea? Someone put the teacup down right in front of me on the telly. When I suddenly looked up, Derrick, who had just lifted his upper body, was on his way across the sofa. No, which was given out of courtesy. I immediately refused. Because I didn't just come here to have a tea with him. Derrick, sitting opposite, paused at my answer. And soon, with an indifferent nod, he tilted the kettle in his glass. The reddish liquid was steaming, whether it was made by hand or prepared all the time. Put the teapot down, and he said bluntly. There was another problem with the nights. Yes, I nodded without delay. As you may have heard from the butler, I didn't pick on that far-off quarrel. I'll see you separately. I am not blessed. It seemed like an excuse, so don't talk too much. But I had to go through all my faults once already. In addition to achieve the desired purpose, one had to get a good preoccupation. So I forced myself to open my mouth. And it seemed like he was in training without permission. I wanted to tell you in advance that this run happened because it might be misinterpreted later. It's done, but Derrick suddenly raised his hand and cut me off. And then what punishment do you want? Punishment, yes, Derrick said casually, nodding his head. I thought you were saying bad things about myself because I didn't leave the training without permission. Tell me what you'll the most you want. I looked at him with a curious look. When did you start caring about me? Of course, if it were real Penelope, I might have gone wild saying heal them right away. But I didn't mean to. It was an anecdote that might be repeated again. Besides, today I'm just trying to make an opportunity out of it. Is my opinion important? Just leave it. What? It's not a big deal to talk about. Something that I didn't have a good reputation for. As I shrugged and answered, Derrick's expression hardened. He kept silent for a while, then opened his mouth heavily. You must have heard the news that Mark was fired the other day. Yes, I heard. I nodded roughly. I added, I'm sorry for all of that. If I try, it doesn't change the attitude of the knights. Of course, that's also because I didn't behave properly. Derrick shut his mouth again. At that moment I had the illusion that the blue eyes that were directed at me seemed to have shaken. I don't think so, I told the purpose straight away, not caring. The knight's punishment is fine. Instead, I have a favor to ask you. What? Please attach a swordsman to Eclise. What? A deep bone was engraved in his forehead, perhaps an unexpected remark. Slavery can't be a knight, I'm sure you know that much. Even if he can't be a formal knight, the color of the name is my escort, but after the training. You can't let it go down. Yes, your escort suddenly put down the teacup he was holding. I thought we needed to talk about the slave's treatment. What kind of treatment? Now stop playing with puns, and pick up the official knight and keep it by your side, yeah. In the first division we have selected some of the good guys. I was dumbfounded by the sudden reversal of the topic. What's all of a sudden escort? Derrick spoke without hesitation, as if he had informed us of the facts that had already. I'll send you their personal information through the butler. Wait a minute, young Duke. I immediately regained my senses and stopped him from speaking. What do you mean a pun? There's only one Eclipse as my escort. He looked very displeased to see if he was offended by the suspension. I think you've been over-rewarded for the help you received from the slave at the festival. What reward? What you wear is also a subject of slavery. Didn't you all condone it? I lost my words and looked at him. It was a shock to me that my desperation to Eclise to survive seemed like a cow's nest in his eyes. In the end, I mean to make Eclipse an escort, and it didn't even work from the beginning. Derrick softened his voice as he watched me harden my lips. I'm not saying I'm going to kick him out of the mansion. You need distancing yourself from the slave. I don't like the glances and rumors of you and that slave in the nights. Isn't that what's happening today? No, it's not. Eclise's treatment in the nights is poor, so it's like today. This is what happens, young Duke. I briefly dismissed the transfer of his responsibility. Derrick paused and stared at me with cold eyes. Slavery is everywhere. But at the same time, he is my only escort. Penelope Eckert. Derrick called my name when he sees me talking straight back to him. It was a warning, but I laughed out loud and didn't care. How ridiculous it must look to the princess escort to have no teacher. The owner is naturally considered ridiculous. So you've got a new escort. I said I'd give it to you. Did they say they wanted it? Or did they strike the bottom in the family? Am I not getting the message that you're giving me back my position? How bad was the rumor of a knight and a princess, which meant that he even changed his guard to explain her. Maybe you noticed that Derrick's jaw became tight and he kept his anger under control, or for any other reason his lips were flushed several times. Soon he gave a deep-seated voice. Not that, Penelope. An unexpected answer leaked out of the tightly coupled teeth. Not that, but I just decided you need several guards of yours after the trial. You could be the target of Marquis Ellen. I almost fell for what he said. I managed to get myself together. Why do you make such a judgment now and then? When do you call the nobility a thunderbolt that has roamed the crossbow? If I were Penelope, I would have already died when I ran into an assassin. Penelope, who had only one escort and one maid, was destined to die several times in a hunting competition in the first place. Then do as I say. I hold back the rising emotions. I once again demanded. I don't need a knight who ignores me. If you're so worried about me, please put a sword on Eclise's head and let him serve as a proper escort, not just in name. You'll do that, right? Derrick didn't turn me down like a knife until now. Including today, I was asking for the poor hospitality in the mansion I've been in. I was always treated only as a child by Duke, and I was treated unfairly even though I hadn't had a serious accident recently. I didn't ask for it to be improved separately. To prepare for a time when you really need something like today. It wasn't long before Derrick took a deep sigh. Managed to let something go. I got it. I'm relieved. At the same time, I felt more miserable in the situation where even the treatment of employees that I had received had to be used. But there's something you should know. You can't put the knights in the family as teachers like any other silk stamp. At that time, Derrick pointed out the problem with a sound that looked pretty messy. Now he is a slave to the empire. He came from a defeated country. Teaching swordsmanship to enemies is a disgrace to the imperial law. Then if he stabs even a guard, and it could lead to rebellion. Rebellion, my eyes glared. Because it was a realistic wall that I had never thought of. How was it in the game? I recalled. It didn't come out in detail, but in the game, the Duke brought Eclise in. Did he take such risks and appreciate his ability? I felt bitter in my mouth. The Duke brought him to the game. He might have honed his sword more easily than he is now, but I didn't regret stealing him. He saved me from the gutter because I knew how valuable the position was. So let's look for the right person from the outside. Derrick's voice suddenly awakened the idea of a temporary award. For now, make sure you're satisfied with it. Thank you, young Duke. I thanked him a little later. I didn't know it would be such a tricky process. It was amazing that the man came this far to give it to me. When he achieved his goal, young Duke, who was standing on the edge, softened up. Thanks to this, I was able to wear an awkward smile around my mouth as a token of gratitude. At that moment, the blue eyes that I encountered flinched finely. At the same time, above his head, the orange blinks. While staring up at it blankly, somewhere clear sounds broke the silence. When I turned my head, a crimson bird was flapping its wings again, wary of me. The bird tilted its head left and right like an owl. Whenever that happened, the jewel sparkled in 5 colors. Why don't you go see it up close? I was struck by a sudden voice. He turned his eyes to look at my face. It's not on guard. It's amazing that it's have the same color as you. Do you recognize me? I was surprised, and he turned his head up. I turned to the bird again. I don't think I'm being wary. The bird flapping its wings one more time. He seemed to be acting cute, asking me to look at him. The window frame with the cage was right in front of the sofa for the yes. Having been curious about the strange bird's appearance for a while, I stood up and approached the cage without refusing. When it saw myself getting closer, the bird tilted its head from side to side with a clear sound. As Derrick said, it really seemed to me that I was puzzled by the similarity between my hair color and his fur. The state of the Exchequer considers Flapapinho a messenger of God. Then a dry voice came from the back of the curtain was heard. Before I knew it, Derrick, who stood up following me, walked up and stood beside me. Is the bird's name Flapapinho? Yes. I suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu. It's definitely a bird I've never seen before. But it was a familiar name. Where did I hear that? At the moment of reflection, in the original state of the Exchequer, it is regarded as a national treasure, and the king has given a special tribute to commemorate this hunting competition. There was a scene where Derrick's words flashed through my mind. Rare animal that he caught in a hunting contest. I remember seeing something dark red hanging among the hounds. So this is what it is then. This was deserved the top spot. The fact that he had caught something so rare was in the midst of this fresh air. The Flapapinho is a self-inflicted body laying eggs only once during its lifetime. Whether it was cheesy, he silently added an explanation about the bird. The heartless lawn whose offspring have not been born hardens and turns into this eye-like figure. As I looked at his words with a bird's eye, a brilliant beam of light reflected in all directions. It was strange and mysterious, as if it had been embedded with a diamond. Then it becomes a jewel of priceless value. The poppin' diamond you wanted for your last birthday, the gem Penelope asked for the egg that this bird gave birth? I looked at the bird with strange eyes, beeped Gile. When our eyes met, the bird cried again and flapped its wings. You must have known your master. It fluttering as soon as you see it. You can taking it to your room. I was originally going to give it to you. I looked back at Derrick with a puzzled look at the sudden noise. He looked at the cage, not at me, and made a careless move. They say they're still unborn, and they'll give birth one day. That means I could have the popping diamond that Penelope wanted last year. I don't understand his feelings at all. What is it a reward for not believing me before the trial? But isn't it too brazen to be without saying a word of apology? Do you want me take it and fall for it? Maybe he knew the idea of getting crooked, but he just stood stiff and rigid. And then a long time later. Yeah, I didn't like it, and suddenly, he straightened his face. There was a gold-losing smile. You're always looking for a reason from me. Actually, I don't know. It was me who was embarrassed by the answer. Looking at him blankly, he opened his mouth silently. I was just walking and found this, and I remembered what you said you wanted. There's only one rare species. I guess I didn't want to be taken away by none. I think he meant the magician who made a mess at hunting competition. Now does that explain why? Nothing was explained. I was amazed by that. So, why did you think of something I wanted last year? I wanted to ask more, but I tried hard to hold it in. That wasn't really important anyway. You've been holding him for me. Thank you, but I don't want it. I spoke in a calm tone. The blue eyes was immediately looked with wonder. How come? I don't think I'll be responsible until it lay eggs. I looked carefully at him, even though I spoke. My heart was pounding because I was afraid that a twisted man like last time would say the same thing, like throw it away or kill a bird. Surprisingly, Derrick agreed with me with a nod. Then I'll keep taking care of him. What the hell's wrong with him? After seeing him again with wide eyes, I was soon convinced. A bird that produces expensive jewelry, it cannot be killed. Come lookin' sometimes instead. I'm not sure if I'll ever find it again because it's rare. The bird cried once as if to answer his words. I replied obediently because I liked the fine bird very much. Of course, he didn't say it was only when you weren't there. An awkward silence fell in the office for some time after the reply. Watching birds cry intermittently, it was time to think about the time to say goodbye. When my father retires in a few years, I'll be taking over the dukedom. Derrick suddenly broke the silence. You're so prepared, but you're bound to have a vulnerability in the process. The enemies will not let the gap slip through somehow and undermine Eckhart. You'll get into it. Was very out of the blue. He continued his words without hesitation, even though my eyes was bewildered. I have to control and prepare for all that in the future, as I have done so far. It's a family I have to protect and take responsibility for. It also includes you, Penelope Eckhart. All of a sudden he looks me in the eye. I stared straight at him. In the cold, sober, arrogant form of aristocrats, he said with every word of mind. It's not a big deal to lose some weight to block things that harm Eckhart's reputation. I didn't mean to pin on you, I immediately realized. He's making excuses for the conversation he had in prison the day before the trial. I wouldn't say I was right, but even if I go back, I will repeat the same choice again. Because it was the best thing to get rid of the slander of the aristocratic assassin who has put you on the false accuse. The blue eyes blazed with unknown passions. It was similar to when I looked at himself who was making a statement on my own at the court. But I admit that I was hasty. From now on I will listen to you and act with prudently. Because I think you can carry out your will without using evil anymore. He finished by saying you have changed and will not do it again. I could understand through my head as he said, he was soon to lead the great Duke, and every moment, it is all that we have to make a reasonable judgment. Even though it's actually driving my brother to the abyss. There was not a word of apology, but I knew this was Derrick's way of apologizing, which was raised by a thorough aristocracy. However, there was no way to stop the mind from getting crooked. You won't do that anymore, piss off. I laughed cynically. What's the use of all that now? The real Penelope that uses evil has disappears. I'm not the same as I said before. Words of no need were filled to the top of my neck, but I swallowed them until the end. The last time I saw him was only 32%. Penelope, he called me in an impatient voice. I want to be responsible for what I've done in the future. I don't expect it. I stopped him, took a deep breath and smiled. I told you. His face was queer with my words. The orange-colored favorability above the head began to sparkle. I can't see the number, so it's flushing. I didn't know if it was a sign or a negative. My heart was in a hurry. I'll leave you alone, thank you for catching the bird. I turned around in a hurry, as it was likely to cause another plunge. And it was the moment I was about to head for the office door. When it comes to mining, an unexpected remark caught my attention. Always put the butler on his behalf. I looked back at him in a quaint mood. He still gave me advice with a distorted face. If it is known that young Princess is the owner, there will be people who ignore it and shameless people who stick to you. You can use the wizard in the family if you want. He's already know about the emerald mine. Surprised at the fact that he knew, I couldn't say anything for a while. So what's the status of a man's favor that's no longer visible? A few days later, early in the morning, the butler came to tell me about the mine. As instructed by Nis, I put out 3 unprocessed, high-end gemstones at the auction house. And all 3 gems from one top, we were awarded a bid at a price that was 10 times the last auction price. What I was startled because I created a random competition to set the top for distribution, but this was meaningless. As it turns out, it doesn't seem to be the top of the original jewelry. The butler also replied with a face that he did not know the language. You've heard of the top of the White Rabbit. When I opened my mouth wide, it was the top run by Vinter Vernandi. What the hell's wrong with him? I thought I'd touch $1 billion, but I was really embarrassed by the unexpected development. I don't even think it's an episode of the game. It was unclear. It was just too much to think that my gemstone was coveted. If that is the case, there was no reason to sweep away everything by winning the last auction price 10 times. How did he know I was the owner of the mine and bought the gemstone? The butler carefully asked me if I knew him, like in an instant. Do you know the place, miss? No way, I quickly denied it. Then shall we contact him? For now, put it on hold for a moment. Hold it, I have to think about it. The butler tilted his head in wonder. But with 100% favor in front of the male lead, and another male lead is the only one. I had to be careful about what I did. Besides, when it comes to mining, he was like my V. It's a big deal if the butler finds out that I secretly meet him. No, I hurriedly wrapped up the conversation. That's all you have to say, and the butler added that he still had something to say. Do you remember the 4 men you ran into at the apprentices' quarters a while ago? The butler was extremely reticent as to whether he was going to recall. Not to mention it, I answered him, yeah, why? In the evening they were dismissed from the night. Dismissed? It was unexpected news. I have told to leave it alone, but they were forced to kick it out. Well, that's great. I twisting the corners of my mouth and laughed. I was surprised to see how fast it progressed, but it was not unexpected. It was time to feel sorry for not being able to see their faces when they were kicked out. Also, the Duke has put them on trial for contempt of the nobility. The following words indeed were unexpected. Also, the young Duke has put them on trial for contempt of the nobility. I was in a strange mood in an instant. I couldn't figure out what Derrick was thinking when he told me to tell him what punishment I wanted. What happens if I win the trial? They will be sentenced to prison. Prison, yes, or they have to pay a large amount of compensation, but they can't afford it. The thought that it was too much for a bad mouthful flashed through my mind. But I decided to turn it off soon regardless of the intention of yesterday's matter. It was done by Derrick. And Mr. Butler suddenly lowered his voice and became depressed. I've done the job for Eclise. I was delighted. Really, who is it, Sir Spencer, who was the deputy head of the Imperial Knights Division who retired 2 years ago? After retirement he went missing and he was teaching riding and swords to children in a town where the commoner of the capital lived. It felt like a hidden expert in sword, as if to support my idea, the butler added. He was well known for his great swordsmanship in his days of active service. I paused for a moment ago because there was a wish that the possible Eclise would be the sight of the sword master after I escaped. In normal mode he hides his skills and eventually betrayed Penelope. Well, it doesn't matter, but I put down the thought I have for a momentarily. He came out and saved the master. I wish I had been a plus to your favorability, but it's not going to fall off unexpectedly. In addition, he is a genius from heaven, and in less than a month he will be in the position of sword master. A little later I'm going to lead him along the way to Sir Spencer. We have a wagon at the back door behind us. Then please call Eclise, and first I'll be ready and out soon. My lady, the butler looked surprised. Yes, it's the first day, so I have to send him off. I nodded and smiled, and now it's been over 3 weeks, until the coming-of-age ceremony where the real hostess appears. To escape from this fucking place and return to the original world, I decided to try everything I could. While the butler was picking up Eclise first in the dormitory, I washed my face and changed my clothes. And I took out a dark red dress that was close to black with a thin material and wore it. The other day, when I attended the eve of a hunting competition, I saw myself dressed in a blood-red and colorful dress. This is the door when you think of a slight increase in sensitivity. It was good looking in the mirror and smiling contentedly. I left the room straight away and headed to the back door of the mansion to go to the back garden. As I quietly opened the door, the meeting that I had recently faced the Crown Prince unfolded immediately. Thoroughly managed flower stems were gently shaken by the blowing wind. As I was about to walk towards the back door, I paused at something that caught my eye. In front of the garden, unknown light green flowers were in full bloom. I came up to it and picked one of the most blooming flowers. It's cliché, but it's similar to the color of my eyes. A few days ago I returned the dried seed flower crown, and I took it seriously and turned around again. I walked after a while. When I got to the back gate, I found Eclise and the butler had already arrived. Far away, dark red gauge bars shone clearly. I quickly moved my steps, hiding the flowers behind me. Eclise master, his eyes were round like a puppy, as if he had not expected me to come. How do you get here? It's your first time going, but I'm the one who nervous. He dropped his eyes at my words, but not at all nervousness. I didn't care and smiled and bid, how do you feel? It's done how you wanted. Eclise's eyes flinched finally. He was so expressionless that it was hard to tell by his face. But for a long time he opened his mouth and let out his innermost thoughts. Good, that's a good thing. That was a satisfying answer. Only then did I pull out what I had hidden behind my back. Come on. The reaction shook the light green flower with a tongue and a slight slap on the Eclise nose. It was not a break, but a sweet scent of flowers spread among us in the air. Gray eyes slowly grew bigger. This on the way I thought of you, so I plucked it. I slowly brought my hand with the flowers close to his face. After passing the flower that had flowed down the ring finger and the pinky down to the ear, I gently inserted flowers into his ears. I wondered what to do if you hit my hand right away, but luckily he didn't budge until I moved my hand. The color doesn't go well with a dry face, rough gray hair, so I was half joking and half trying to relax you. The appearance of this clutch with flowers next to the garden itself is rather, It was amazingly bright and well matched. I stared at him for a while and soon threw up all my feelings. "You're pretty," it was pure appreciation. At that moment the pupils of Eclise's eyes were shaking to the point. He soon dropped his head as if to hide at the tips of the ears with flowers in place of the face. I could see this burning redness. This is definitely a plus. Looking at the shiny dark red gauge bar on him alternately, I opened my mouth, covering a smile of remorse. "I did my best to find your teacher, so do your best in thinking of me." I raised my head in a haughty way and bragged about it. "The hidden gin that Derrick saved me. Actually, he didn't have to know, all right?" "Okay," Eclise replied in a submissive manner. Soon he lifted the head he was hiding on and, "I will do my best to be a proud knight to my master," he said, looking at me with eyes full of unknown emotions. I fell into a daze. For a moment it occurred to me that his gray-colored eyes seemed to be much darker than usual. "I think we'll have to go now, lady." At that time the butler came up and woke me up. "I'll go, come on, follow the housekeeper, Eclise." I smiled awkwardly and beckoned Eclise. He stared at me for moments at the urging of the butler and turned slowly. The dark red gauge bar moves away. Standing still in the position until they disappeared out of the rear gate, I came to my senses a moment later. Oh, good feelings! I realized I hadn't been able to check his favorability all of a sudden. For some reason it felt as if a storm had hit and disappeared for a moment. Back in my room I sat in front of my desk thinking about the news from the butler this morning. Vinter Verdandi, when I think about it, it's been a long time since I saw him. In fact, it was good to meet them at least once. I wondered what color had changed over his head, and there was Phil Yoga to find out if he had contacted her, as it was only a short time before she appeared. Tap tap, I mumbled, tapping my finger on the desk. Is the top contract excuse the best way to meet? But not the emerald mine wasn't mine. That's because Butler already acted as an agent for me, so I shouldn't have come forward to own it. There was no need to announce that. I opened the bottom of the desk drawer and pulled out a white envelope. But something inside the drawer came out with the envelope. I opened my eyes wide. A white handkerchief shaped like a rabbit. After the trial, Vinter used magic to show it. I put what Emily gave me in the drawer and I forgot. I remembered something that had happened. I took out the rabbit carefully with the white envelope so that it wouldn't come loose. So I guess I'll have to return this too. I looked at the two alternately. My torn mind became firm. I have to go see a vacant lot in a short period of time. That's how I got up from my seat. Come on. I had to lie down in bed quickly. It was because I had a lack of sleep, because I saw the butler and Eclise, who visited early in the morning. It was just as soon as I was about to take a walk with my body that was sinking. Suddenly the closed window next to the bookshelf burst open, and a tremendous gust of wind began to blow. What, man, I can't even open my eyes. I fluttered my arms frantically in this rush. I was so busy that I could not feel the sense of déjà vu that I had already experienced it once. After a while the wind subsided like a lie. It was then. From somewhere the thick voice of a man with a loud noise began to flow out. A supportive job, a contract to get a job. I panted around out of spirits. What kind of bastard? And soon found. Come to the top, come on please. A rabbit made from handkerchief on my desk is talking with its head curiously raised. The sound of the rabbit's voice was suddenly cut off after a word that seemed to inform where the message was from. I watched the handkerchief for a while, fearing that a husky voice would keep coming out. But nothing was added. The room was quickly silenced. Alas, that's when I realized that my body was hardened by shock. It's flinched and moved. Why do you deliver in this crazy way? Can't you send a message in a normal way? It was when I was moaning, sweeping down my startled chest. With a sudden light in front of me, I've received a suspicious invitation from System. Wizard Vinter Verdandi, do you want to go directly to the top? Yes or no, what is it? My mind went blank in the moment. Why does the system window pop up? The system window usually marked the beginning of a new episode. It meant that this was also one of the many routes of the game. It was something I've already experienced in the last hidden quest. But the fact that I don't realize was moving on to the game's story made me forget everything. No, that means I'm getting through the game. I tried to take it positively. It was very uncomfortable to tell the butler and get ready to go out anyway, but that's great. Wait for me, system, you don't understand me, but I'm spouting as if I'm giving you an order. I moved fast. I take out the lobes and masks hidden in the closet. Oh, I stopped abruptly. Come to think of it, I shouldn't wear mask. Because I was confiscated by Derrick last time. I lost in thought. Do I really need to cover my face like last time? In fact, it was meaningless because we know each other's identity already. But if you're meeting at the top, Winter must be wearing a mask. I'm going to pretend to be the top state in a mask, but isn't it kind of uncomfortable to face me with no status or face? Anyway, it doesn't help Derrick, who had seized the mask. While thinking, there was one thing that suddenly crossed my mind. I hurried over to the desk. And suddenly I opened the second drawer. Inside, there was a bracelet on a platinum string that Derrick had given me after confiscating the mask. The jewels were enchanted with magic. Put it on. It worked as protection magic, and appearance change magic will be activated. The wizard said, in the eyes of others you'll look like a boy your age. There was something in my ear that he said back then. It's called cosmetic change magic. I quickly pulled the bracelet out of the drawer and put it on my wrist. Then a flash of light came into the purple jewels. I looked at it with a curious eye, and then I hurried to the dressing table. Awesome, it's true. When I looked in the mirror, my true self disappeared. Instead, a pretty boy with short curly hair was seen. All I could tell was my blue-green eyes, and my hair color and length had changed. There's a little bit of my face left. It was long, but it looked much more natural. That's amazing. Alas, does your voice change too? I stuttered out my words. A thin voice for a man, but a little husky voice came out than my original voice. It sounded like the voice of a boy whose voice had not come around. Hello, mic test. I've been repeating myself, and I've been completely acclimated to my voice, and I've been muttering to myself. But I'm still going to need you to be a helpful debunk. When I saw his dark hair, I remembered Derrick, who gave me a magic bracelet. I couldn't imagine his face when he was young, because he was so sharp and mature in appearance that I couldn't imagine his face at all when he was young. Thinking of Derrick as teenager, I suddenly realized that what I was wearing a dress. The boy's appearance did not match the white dress. Fortunately, I had a changed appearance and a very resonant suit. It's a suit that was set up during a hunting competition. After changing into a gray jacket, shorts, and semi-stocking, it really looked like a boy. You look like a rich boy going to pick up a pretty girl. I was smiling in the mirror, and I didn't forget the rabbit-shaped handkerchief and white envelope I put on my desk and said, let's go. Instead of a pretty lady, let's go get some pretty wizards. When I opened my eyes with a bright light, I stood in front of the shabby building. Straight up the stairs and stood at the familiar old door. As I was about to knock, I remembered that the door opened to that temple the other day. So I grabbed the doorknob and turned it around. The door didn't open. I was embarrassed and knocked the doorknob a few more times. What is it? Where did it go? Who are you? It was the moment a cool voice rang out from behind. I turned back in surprise. A tall man in a white rabbit mask was pointing at me with a child in a lion mask. No, you said he was a secret wizard. Why do you always take out the cane first? He was stuttering and looking alternately at the round swarms of light at the end. The top of the head suddenly caught my eye. The vivid purple gauge bar blinked fast. Who's hanging around in front of someone else's business? He snapped coldly at me, staring blankly. I don't requests with people your age. Please go back. I'm a client who's been told by the rabbit. I came to my senses and I answered quickly, just in case the sense of arc would plummet again. And I added it awkwardly. I just spoke informally. Luckily for my answer, his purple gauge bar stopped blinking. A chilly wind swept through the empty gull throat. Soon the rabbit mask slowly lowered the cane that was pointing at me and opened its mouth. It's a substitute with a voice full of bewilderment. Winter, who was talking to me, soon turned his head to the lion mask beside him. Put it off, he's a guest. The lion put down his little hand without a reply, and put his cane in his arms with a quick gesture. It was a well-trained. Last time I was very glad to see how he helped me during the incident. I wanted to pretend to know, but I quit because I don't think I'll be recognized anyway. Let's go inside and talk the empty space, which put the cane in his arms lifted one finger. An iron clatter at the same time, behind my back the tightly locked door opened. Come on in. The vacant lot which came up the stairs, entrusted me in a courteous manner. I don't know why, but I felt there was a lot of clutter in his dark blue eyes looking down at me. I entered without care. His once-in-a-lifetime office remained the same without a single change. Sit down. I sat down on the sofa at his second command. And then he came in, and when he went in, he left the boy outside and closed the door. Shut down. When I looked at it with a curious look, he gave me an answer casually. We're going in through the back door. He took off his coat and sat across from me on the hook. And as before, I beckoned as if I were calling someone. The cupboard door on the wall opened into the temple, and the kettle and teacup flew in. The boiling kettle is cold on its own. In a daze over of somebody's appearance. I was just coming back from work because you came right away last time, said Victor suddenly. I didn't know you'd come so soon. So his dark blue eyes stared at me. It was something I heard somewhere. At the same time that idea resembles this, I suddenly forgot. One fact came to mind. I didn't know that clients would visit so soon because they would usually come a day or two after receiving a call. The arrogant aristocrats here used to have a grown-up custom. Oh shit, I'm here again, and I'm running like a horse. My face turned red. Embarrassed, I uttered anything with a cough. You'd better take care of it quickly without delay. I really said nothing. When I belatedly attached the ruler, I saw the rabbit's eyes bend through the hole on the side. Just say the same side. Vinter tried to hide his smiling voice and gave me consideration. As long as I'm here anyway, I'm only a top shareholder, should I? I accepted the consideration without hesitation. It wasn't because I was embarrassed at all. But is it a bracelet with the magic of change in appearance? Suddenly the gaze of his was on my hand. Still emitting a magnetic glow, I could see the bracelet Derrick gave me. To sneak out. I'm glad you understood what I meant. So Vinter nodded and added. I also thought a lot about how to send a message. What's your problem? I tilted my head. Let's do it. He went straight to the topic. I tried to send the rabbit away like last time, but because you're so frightened. If you found the video enjoyable, would you consider recommending it to a friend? Please share what you found most memorable. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for updates.